Check it out!
Escape reality with Matt Z.
Well, Dak, here's the deal. I'm the best there is, plain and simple. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I piss excellent.
Three, two, one. We are live with the man of the hour, Sebastion and Perez, everybody.
Hey, how's it
Put
going,
your hands
Matt?
together for this legend of a human being.
Hey.
I've been looking forward to this podcast, man. First off, I want to say thank you for coming on. I've been super pumped about this. I've been excited for podcasts, but I think this is one of the ones I've been very excited for. So to kind of a little backstory, Perez is very passionate about, I call him Perez, by the way, people.
That's my last name, so just a little confusion, yeah.
Yeah, stick with it. But a little backstory, though, Perez is, essentially, to keep it short, very passionate about the environment.
Yeah, I like to think so.
He's wanted to come on here, and I want him to come on as well, too, so we can talk about the environment and the current state of it.
Yeah.
So to kind of open this up here, the first question I want to ask for you is,
Well, like before that, I just want to say thank you for having me. Like, I think this is such a great platform for being able to discuss this topic, because I feel like in day to day, it's very hard to get this topic and just to address like certain habits that people have, and without coming off as preachy or like just it's a very like neutral area to have this conversation and to have a great discussion, in-depth discussion for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do appreciate this opportunity.
no, man, well, I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you saying that as well, too, for handing out.
Yeah.
Bobs.
No worries, man.
But anyways,
No
though,
worries.
to start it off, man, like, you know a lot more about the environment than I do. A lot more. So I want to understand your perspective about the current state of what we're in right now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I think to understand the current state, we have to go back to, like, what we did when we were growing up, right? Like, 'cause me and you, we grew up, shout out to Greenview, we went to Greenview together, yeah. And so, like early 2000s, what we do, like, for environmentalism, we basically sat us down in the gymnasium and they taught us about recycling and called it a day, right? And I think that definitely things have gotten way more complicated than that. So yeah, it's just and there's a lot of things have changed, but yeah, I want to just inform everyone that besides all the doom and gloom that you hear out there, because there is bad news. Like, I can't deny that. If I were to deny it, I'd be either just oblivious or just choosing to not accept it. But yeah, no, like, it's not that bad, and that we, like, basically the purpose why I want to be on here is because just to change the perspective, change like how people think about it. It's not over, because I've met and I've talked to a lot of people who have basically been deflated and be like, okay, well, what's the use? This X, Y, and Z is happening, and it's like, why am I even putting in my effort? Or like, it's done. Like, why bother, right? Which just sucks, because like I've also been there too. I've been at that point where like I've been looking at the little things I do, and I'm like at the grand scheme of things, does it really matter? But if there's one thing I want people to take away from this, is like that, like that change moves slow, and we have made progress, and the narrative has to change. Like, if we want to make good changes and sustainable changes, we have to change the narrative, to change our mindset, because really that's what everything starts with, whether that's environmentalism, working out, or anything long term. The mindset has to be there, because if the mindset's not there, you're very likely to just bounce on something, and just skip it and like not be committed.
Yeah,
man.
absolutely. Well, I think just at the end of the day, there has been like just so much, like when you do hear about climate change, it's always, this has to change, this has to happen.
Absolutely.
And it's like this negative pressure that's put on society. And I feel like society almost puts its guards up, because it's like, whoa. Like, why you keep on forcing this on, not necessarily onto us, but it's like, well, you're creating such a negative stereotype around this, the climate change that needs to happen. And it's crazy to see how a lot of people, regardless of how they react to that news, though, but it's the individuals who don't believe in climate change, which I think is completely nonsense, because at the end of the day, you can just go outside and see it for yourself, and it's like, obviously this does have a impact on it. But I think with regards to the whole stereotype around climate change, I think it's almost important to highlight the positives around
Absolutely.
climate change. And Like, did you have in mind some of the positives around the recent changes?
Well, yeah, like but before I get to that, like I mean, I think you mentioned something really cool. That it often feels like we're just forced. Like here's all the shitty things we do, and like here's you gotta fix it like tomorrow, like today, like you gotta do it like. And if you follow some of these bigger environmental NGOs and stuff like that, they'll say, yeah, go vegan, buy an electric car, and install solar panels on your house, which is all really good steps. But let's be honest, not everyone has the space, of money, or just the ability to commit to veganism, shit like that, right? Like I definitely can't. Like I love milk, cheese, yogurts,
Yeah.
beef, everything.
Yeah.
But there's like things I am doing. But so just more like those like everyday commitments, I guess I'd call them. But just like the day-to-day stuff that you can do that still make a big impact.
Yeah, the small changes that you can make on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis have
And
these huge ramifications of positive change in the future.
absolutely, and here's the thing: like the main reason I want to get on this podcast is because it's based after I read this book, "The Future We Choose."
It's a good book, people. We both highly recommend it.
Absolutely. Basically, and the whole premise of it is that we aren't at the end of it. We have these next 10 years to, which our action will dictate what the next 100 years will look like for humanity. So just to like see that this decade is very influential, what our future generations can do. And it's to the point that you brought up of people not believing you. Like when we looked at environmentalism in the 2010s, or like 2000s, there was a lot of like very scientific papers, like here is what could happen, right? But regardless of how do you view the world, whether you think it's flat, cube, like globe, which obviously it is,
Yeah.
but I don't care. Like I don't care what shape you believe this
Shout out
planet
to Flat Earth
is.
Dave, man. Shout out to Flat Earth Dave.
Yeah, so like even if you think it's a octagonal Earth or whatever, at the end of the day, you can see like you turn on the news any other day and you can see somewhere having some drastic effects by climate change. Whether that be like in 2021, I think was a great example. You had the floods in Germany. You had BC. Like look at our back, like our neighbors, right? And they had like the forest fires, and then they had the floods to all of the western United States. Yeah, and it's absolutely wild. There's no like, oh, like this is. Let's sit down and read a scientific paper about it. It's happening, and so yeah, no, it's definitely something that we need to like change the perspective. Like I said, these next 10 years are crucial. But that being said, we have 10 years, so we shouldn't feel like we have to force ourselves to change overnight, right? That's not what we have to do. Yeah, man.
No, absolutely. And I think like one thing I did like about the book is how they created this imagery around these two different worlds that we could live in. And what they did is they said, pick one. Which one do you want to do?
Right.
Like, so to give a little bit of a backstory on the books, the one world is when we don't reach our goals by, I think it's 2030, right?
2050.
But it's like
And
2030 is like the one key year where it's like stuff needs to be turning around.
Or like things like really need to get, like we have like 10
Yeah.
years to like basically put stuff into play. And then from there is like when we really start like have all the policies in place and all the all like the fundamentals down, and then from 2030 to 2050 is we're really reducing those emissions, right? So yeah, it's basically like we don't meet that target for 2030 and definitely not by 2050.
Yeah. Well, and I think like some of the scary imagery that they put in the reader's mind during this book is, for example, with the crops. They're talking about they have to build shelters now because the rain is so unpredictable and there's acid rain that happens that destroys the crops, and and they're unable to predict this weather pattern as well too, because it's so unpredictable at this point, and as well too with the sea oceans rising as well, and how the sea levels are going to come through all the ocean cities and basically turn these skyscrapers into just be sticking up through the water. And I think that's like it is a scary image to have, but I think it's important to have that image as well too.
I think so too. I think just like it really helps in compare and contrast, because the next chapter in that book they talk about like what a society that met our goals would look like, right? So yeah, it's definitely good to know. And like let's be honest here, like climate change, not only is the debate over if it's happening or not, it's already started. It's the question now is how bad is it going to be? And I think that's what the book was trying to get at there. Like, it can either be we can move at warm the or world by 1.5 degrees Celsius per year or less, or we can do like up to 3 or 4 degrees, and that like all those problems that were mentioned could be just exponentially worse, right?
Yeah.
So it's basically like about how we choose to do it. Thus the title of the book, The
Yeah.
Future We Choose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think like a number that like stuck out to me was that if we continue on this path, like the world's going to increase by 3 degrees by the year 2100.
Yep.
Right, and I think that's just it doesn't seem like a big deal, and especially for me, who's somebody who hates wintertime. I'm like, well, instead of minus 23, minus 20, it's
Yeah.
like it's nothing, but I'll take it, right? It's a little bit
Right,
warmer, but it's
right.
the other ramifications of that. It's the melting of the polar ice caps that happen. It's the
Right.
unbearable climate change that happens.
I think too, and like a great point to bring into like yeah, for me and you, like overall, if you tell someone like the weather's gonna increase by a degree or 2 degrees, that doesn't mean a whole lot to us, right? But then you think about like all the processes that need to be within a certain temperature range, right? For example, whether it be um, the like how dry things in the forest or the material in the forest going to be, right? If it's going to be like just 1 degree drier, how it's going to affect like how 1 degree warmer in certain rivers and streams are going to affect certain fish populations, right? Like they that are need to live in cold water,
Yeah.
and then they won't be able to, right? Like so for us, yeah, sure, give and take, we we're fine and we have climate controlled places that we can go to, but for nature, that's crazy. And I think at one point in the book it mentioned like how it's for some natural processes that's like almost exponential, going from 1 degree to 2 degree warming. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about perspective and like how like what scale basically.
Yeah.
Just the warming effects, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think even just with the forest drying up as well too, like that's definitely going to increase the forest fires that would happen as well
Absolutely,
too,
yeah.
right? And that could even cause like we like in Alberta, we've seen what happens with the wildfires here when they get out of control, especially
Absolutely.
BC as well too, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. Like we're prone to this. This is something that happens, and I could only imagine is if even if it's just a small increase in the ability for a fire to spread more rapidly,
Right.
how much that could really affect our lives. You look at LA as well too, when they had to evacuate a few years back there, and
Yeah.
like you just imagine if it was just a little bit more vulnerable, the fire.
Right.
If
Yeah.
it was able to spread just a little bit more because it was a little bit more dry, like how many people would have died from that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think definitely that's something to think about too. Um, in regard to fire, it's definitely really interesting because we went through like the whole 60s, 70s, and 80s with Smokey the Bear, and we were told that like fire is bad, right? But we learned not too long ago, like sometime in the new century here, we learned that like nature uses fire for certain process for like
Yeah.
new trees and stuff like that, right? For opening seeds out of cones and stuff like that. So regardless of what we do, fire is still gonna happen. It's just how the factors that like can increase fire, can make it more, can make bigger ramifications to the landscape, right? For example, if it's a little bit drier or if the wind speeds are a little bit faster, right? Because of certain things of climate change, and I guess this is definitely above my knowledge for sure.
Yeah.
Like this is definitely you have to dig into some science for sure. But yeah, no, it's all those like extra factors that could help a fire to get out of hand, right? But yeah, no, yeah,
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah,
This
go
is
for it.
kind of off topic, but not really at the same time though. So I know I'm gonna avoid that right now. But for somebody like you who has gone to school for like the environment, how like what is the process and what is the purpose of having those controlled burns
right,
that help like kind of reignite the life cycle in the forest?
right. Um, Controlled burns are sometimes like let's say, um, for example, like I know in Banff National Park sometimes they're there to protect like infrastructure, right? For
Okay.
example, like in Banff, they at one point they made a fire line, so if an actual huge like forest fire happened in Banff National Park, there's something that's been already burned and the fuels are been taken away, right?
Okay, yeah.
So you don't need that. Or sometimes it's just a lot of old dead growth and yeah, and you just like it's better to like propagate the stuff. For example, there's a lot of species that really thrive in like new landscapes that have just been burned. For example, grizzly bears, deers, moose, like because there's a lot of new vegetation that comes up, right? Like you look at all these like forests and all these trees, they block so much of the sunlight. So you look at the vegetation, not a lot of it can grow, right? You have, but then when you take away those trees and like all and like that sunshine actually hits the ground, there's so many plants, so many berries that like the animals can take advantage of. But yeah, no, it's great. Well, it's not great, but like,
Yeah, I know what you
um,
mean though.
but like I mean,
Actually
it's like I
that's
mean,
interesting how people are able to manipulate the environment
oh,
around them to help, right? And that's like one thing that does provide some benefits.
absolutely. And I think too, it's important to note that like yeah, for sure, that like anything, it's not like fire is neither fully good nor bad. It's just something that happens, and we can try to mitigate or try to use it to certain advantages depending on what the goal is, right?
Well, I feel like it's like anything in life where it's like the yin and yang. There's good and there's bad, and you have to have the good to have the bad, and you have to have the bad to have the good. And I feel like fire is like, obviously there's a purpose to fire. It cooks food, and it does help with the life cycle of our environment, but it also does cause a lot of destruction as well too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like you definitely got to look at perspective, right? Like if there is a grassland fire, like or like a fire that really changes the landscape for and like makes it better for, let's say, bears or something like that. Like it's great for the bears, but let's say you have little woodland mice that are living in a couple of squared meters. That's terrible for them. Like their whole habitat is just gone, right? Like, so yeah, it's really about perspective. But yeah, no, definitely, yeah, definitely. So it's
Absolutely.
dependent with fire.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
So talking about perspectives, how do you feel that, to kind of go back now to the climate change in the book, The Future We Choose,
Yeah.
how do you feel that individuals can change their perspective around climate change, especially with all this negativity? And I know even this book does paint the picture of the negatives, and I feel like you have to understand the negatives to appreciate the positives that we could potentially get to when it comes to climate change. So how do you feel that humans can take those steps to reach the positive side of changing the world and the future outlook of humanity? Look at a little 6-minute break there. Shit. I don't mind that. All right, man. So I got a little question then.
Yeah, go ahead.
So obviously, and including in this book as well too, they do paint the picture of the negative world. And they bring that negatives forward.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I do understand that it's very important to have that negative perspective in the back of your mind at least. But I think one thing that's really important is to have the positive imagery of what it could be in the front of your mind. So do you know of any potential facts of optimism that people can hold on to kind of give themselves some encouragement going forward?
Absolutely. I think you just have to look into like the history books more or less. Like you look at the previous ecological problems that we had to face. Like I don't know if you remember, like in the late 90s, we kind of still heard about stuff about the ozone, right? And like the ozone hole. And I just did some research and found out that basically it started about like at the end of the 1970s, and it was about 16.3 million kilometers wide, kilometers squared, and now they're predicting that by 2060 it's going to be recovered to pre-1970 conditions. So I think that's like really amazing. And how did we do that?
Yeah.
We banded together like as a planet, and we just decided to ban CFCs, which are like the hairspray products and stuff like that, like the aerosols.
Yeah.
And take that product out, and we managed, right? So I definitely think that was like a big win. Another thing you look back is like whaling was a huge thing, like, and it's so like these wins are so crazy, like that when people think about them now, people almost don't think about them. That's how good they were, right?
Yeah.
That like they're forgotten about. So like yeah, looking at the Atlantic humpback whale, by the 50s there's only 450 of them, right? And now they are like now it's estimated that 90% of the population is back to pre-whaling conditions.
Oh, really?
So like that's huge, and like so much so that like no one talks about the humpback whales because they're good, they're all right. So, and yeah, there's a quote from a different book which I think was really cool. It basically said like a narrative pessimistic narrative is really easy because it's usually you talk about events and stuff that happened just recently. It's fresh in our minds, right? And I think like a great example is be COVID, right? Like it's like, oh, like it's right there, it happened, and it's I don't want to say it's a one-off, but like it's very right there. It doesn't require a lot of research. It's very in your face. It's like, look, this happened, right? But like a optimistic narrative is definitely more about like doing the research and like cause like doing good stuff takes time, right? Like usually, especially it's more worth it if it like takes time and like you've put in the effort, right? And like so it takes time. You have to look back and yeah, it requires to think more about the past.
Yeah.
And people don't tend to forget about the effort that was made, right? For example, like the whaling, right? That's huge. So it's very interesting to see how it takes place. But like I mean, right now currently, it sounds really, it sounds like we're basically up against it, right? It feels like I felt like this before. It feels like that basically it's the 11th hour, and there's nothing we can do. But it's also great to remember that there's been people in history that have also been up against it, but they've been able to make drastic changes to society. Like you think of Martin Luther King and all the stuff he did for civil rights. You think about like the suffragettes and like the voting movement. They definitely did stuff like like the stuff was pretty bleak for them, but they rallied, right? So um, we can either choose to sit in our negative narrative and just be like, well, yeah, it's never gonna get better, or we can like start taking the steps, right? And like there's already stuff that is going on. Like I mentioned, it's like good stories take research and take time, right? Like for example, in the UK, is already using 50% renewable energy. Costa Rica is 100% renewable already, and I just found out a couple days ago that Spain is already also 50% renewable. So it's nothing out of this world. Like it is very doable, and within 10 years, there's a very doable timeline. We haven't like pushed ourselves like all the way to the very last minute, right? So we still there's still hope for humanity for sure. But yeah, no, for sure. And like I think it's also important to know is that these steps that we're making, like what's gonna make difference, it's not like a linear thing. It's not like, oh, okay, we're here, and if we get to this, like we don't know what's gonna make the big impact to help the planet, right?
Yeah.
So all these little actions eventually, who knows what action is gonna be the one that tip the scale, right? Because we're facing a very multi-dimensional issue where it's not like a one-off like the whaling, right? For example, we're facing like an issue that's has problems in all different aspects. For example, from ocean acidification to greenhouse gas and overall temperature rise to deforestation to habitat loss and extinction, right? Like these are all things that are tied together to some extent, right? Some stronger than other, like for example, ocean acidification and greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
But in a way, they're it's a multi-dimensional problem that requires fixing. We've never, like as a species, been up against something that's so problem that's so robust, right? But yeah, no, and I think definitely too is you often think about like just like the power of corporations and stuff like that. And you think it's huge, and you think like that. Oh, there's no way that corporations like are really divesting from fuel, but it really isn't. Like the book mentions too about the Norwegian fund, like they're the Norwegian Parliament Fund, which is $3 trillion in size, and they've divested 13 billion, sorry,
Yeah.
from
The B.
with B, yeah, billion with a B from fossil fuels, while also investing 20 billion into renewables, right? Like, so it's a big step. What else do you want to talk? Like, I could mention here, that OPEC, like the people who are in charge of like setting oil prices more or less, and like the one that oversee everything. They've mentioned in the book too is that their biggest threat is people divesting from natural gas projects, or like sorry, natural gas, but like fossil fuel projects. So we are definitely having an impact, right? And I think too, even if you look at the local scale here in Alberta, like 5 years ago, what you had, um, you really couldn't go into like a fast food place and be like, hey, can I get a Beyond Beef burger? They'd be like, they'd be like, what are you talking about right now?
Yeah, stop smoking crack, kid.
Yeah, it's like, get out. Like, it's a burger place. Get a
Yeah,
burger,
yeah.
right? And it's like, no. But now, the, or like the paper straw. Like, I'll be say how everyone feels with paper straw, but like that's a push that was made, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or the paper bag. Like, and did that solve all the problems? No, but like those were big changes that were pushed on by consumers to corporations, and companies listened. So, and these changes aren't the ones that make the front page, because, like I said, they take time and they're not flashy. They're not like, here you go. Like, you really have to dig for them and wait too, right? So yeah, no. So I definitely think there's and I think it just speaks a lot to the nature of optimism too. It's because people think optimism is being all happy and peppy, but it's really not. Like, it's really easy to be optimistic when you're winning, like,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so
When
it's
things
like
are going good.
when things are going good,
Yeah.
And I think like just being a fan of any sports team when they're doing shitty is a very very like good analogy for this. Like, yeah, like if your team's doing good, like the Oilers, everyone's like super on, super
First 10 games of the season,
great.
everybody's
Everyone loves
happy.
them,
They
and
mind paying
then
taxes, everybody's happy.
and then when they start doing, or like Canucks too, like, and then the moment they start losing, like everyone's like, he needs to go, he needs to get
He's
fired.
outta
Like,
here, yeah.
everyone's out for blood. So
Yeah,
it's like,
literally.
but optimism isn't that. Optimism isn't something that you do when you're celebrating. Optimism is gritty. Optimism is like you put in the work and you stick through it,
Yeah.
and it's tough, because that's what makes it more rewarding too, right? Like, that you actually like fought for it.
Yeah, it's something you have to work for.
Exactly,
You can't just wake up
absolutely.
in the morning and have optimism.
No, absolutely, and
Um,
it's yeah, like, it's basically the idea of like that you are willing to face challenge head on. Yeah,
So I think another thing that I came across in the book as well too,
yeah,
something that we can be very optimistic with, and something that we can at least hold on to, like, oh, that's a very good positive. I know you mentioned Costa Rica, and Christiana Figueira. I don't know if it's her last name.
yeah.
Anyways, Christiana
Yes.
Figueira.
Figueira,
She's from she's from Costa Rica, and she was saying how Costa Rica was able to take the military budget that they had there and reinvest it into the biodiversity protection and education.
Yeah.
And essentially, in the long run, which is something super important for us, is to look in the long run of things. And they're at a point where they're 100% now clean energy,
Yeah.
which is super positive, and obviously a leader in the world as well too. But I want to kind of go as well too to the whole optimism thing. And when you just look at the psychology of how individuals are made, what is our one primal goal in life? And that's to survive.
Right.
Right? It's to survive. And how do we survive? It's this ability to detect danger, this anxiety that we have on us, this ability to look at the negatives, because that's what's scary in front of us, and that's what could potentially end us. And
Yeah.
especially when you look at a more optimistic viewpoint, a lot of it goes against the basic foundation of how humans are made, which is to be safe.
Right.
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 And a lot of times when people have a hard time getting out of bed, it's their body's way of being, okay, we're just being safe here. You're staying in bed today because you're staying safe. You don't want to go out there in the world.
Right.
You don't want to get into a situation where you feel uncomfortable. We're just going to stay in bed because for now that is the safest option to stay alive, because out there is terrifying, essentially. And I think what's important is switching the narrative, and instead of, like what you had said, switching that narrative, and instead of thinking about, oh, the world's going to end, fuck it, let's give up, whatever, let's go do all this shit, is to have a sense of accountability and say, hey, no, like, all this pressure, or not pressure necessarily, but all this opportunity that lies in front of us is, like, it's our ability to go out there and change the world and save humanity for years to come.
Right.
Like, that's our opportunity to create, and as a society, we should be thankful to have that opportunity.
Right.
We should be
Right.
proud to have that opportunity going forward.
Right. Like, yeah, we are definitely the generation that that future generations can look back on and be like, wow, they really stepped up, right? Because
It's like,
like
how
it's
we look
not
back at people in World War II.
yeah, it's like it's not
Yeah.
set in stone. Like, there's still room to push. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's very crucial, just to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
That we're not doomed. We're still have room to fight and give it our all.
Yeah. So now I kind of want to say we've obviously talked about kind of the big picture and how to change an individual's perspective on the situation. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like obviously the book kind of mentions some of the things that you can do on a day-to-day basis. And it's really not that much. It takes only a few minutes of your day, if anything, to kind of go above and beyond. It's creating the composting. It's the recycling. That just takes those extra 20 seconds a day. And like those 20 seconds can have such a ramification for years to come.
Absolutely.
Do you have any other examples that we can use on a day-to-day basis
Right.
to help this change?
I think yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that can be done, but I think definitely one thing that has to be top of mind for sure is that you have to consider that different people have different abilities on what they can and can't do, right? Like for example, like space or like budget wise. So you have to be very mindful. There's not like I wish there was a list of like top 10 things that everyone can do and it just turn everything around.
Easy
But
peasy.
unfortunately that's not the case, right? Like there's some people who can do more and some people who can do less. So yeah, it definitely varies. But like you said, it's not something that really takes a lot of like and doesn't have to be a lot. Doesn't have to be a huge investment of your time or money into something that you can do. And yeah, I have a couple things here that I do, and I can just talk about them as to like maybe it'll give some people some insights on what they can do, right? And I think like two is once like people listen to this, they can be like, okay, like yeah, I can try one of these things, and as time goes on, I can adapt them to my lifestyle or to whatever, like so I can be more efficient in my own. You can make them your own, and just like and really be able to make something that's not like really huge and like newsworthy, but something like you can take over time with you, right? And that's what matters. Like if you do all these things, like people tell you, like, oh, go vegan, like just like from one moment to another,
Yeah.
buy electric car and get solar panels, like great, but like if you can't sustain that and you only do it for like 3 months or a year
Yeah.
out of 10, it's like pfft, what even was the point? And you go back to your old habits, it's like what even was the point?
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, um, let's see what I got here. I think I'd start with the first thing I do is just like something that we all have to do whether we want to or not. It's just like how we consume stuff, right? Like we all buy stuff, and I think it's being like very mindful of what you buy, right? And like what cost things really have. For example, if you go and buy like some like clothing that's cheaper, like yeah, it'll be cheaper for you, but like let's say if it's poorly built and you have to replace it like in X amount of time, whether if you would have gone for something that's a little bit better quality, maybe a little higher price, but last you a while, in the long term you're saving that money, right? And also the environmental costs and stuff like that goes with that, right? Yeah, so basically just like in the consumerism stuff aside is like I try to avoid impulse shopping.
Good for
And
you.
just yeah, no, it's
Good for
just
you.
I mean it's good for the wallet first and foremost, let's be
Amen to
honest.
that, yeah.
But like yeah, it's just like and I started doing this like more last year, and it's been very relieving, not just for the mind too. Cause we're always been like, oh, like there's a sale, like we have to act on it right now, or we'll like have
Yeah.
fear of missing out,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like so but like then you like realize like okay, like this is what I'm looking for, and whether it be like a sweater or something like that, and you're like, oh, okay, there's a sale and it's 20% whatever, and like you don't have to, like you're not like rushed anymore. You're like, okay, I'll take my time, I'll look around, and yeah, that'll be great too. And with that too, you can look at more factors like, okay, like what is this product really about, right? For example, like now I find myself I really like, especially if I'm trying to buy something online, I look on like about us page about like the company and stuff like that. So that's like really important. But yeah, like definitely, and one thing I do is try to stay away from fast fashion. So for people who don't know what that is, it's basically, yeah, yeah, man, yeah, man,
Yeah,
definitely,
okay,
definitely.
you're looking at me, fuck, you know, see how the fuck I dress. Anyways, continue.
No, it's all good, man. Basically, like it's like those like Zara's and the Gaps and everything where they release clothing like almost always. Like you're always in there
Yeah.
and you see new shit,
I
right?
got the new and trendy stuff. Fuck, the stuff that was popular 2 months
It's
ago.
like
I got the new thing.
exactly. So you justify those overall just because like they're really and they're really not built to last. They're really built to be assembled fast and then you worn a couple times and then they're gone, right? Like so
Yeah.
yeah, just avoid those for sure. And I mean just like I was watching a video actually and it was talking about like how just like a t-shirt how intensive that process is. Like for example, one t-shirt water wise, I know this stat's been thrown around here and there on the internet, but like it according to this video it said one t-shirt requires about 2700 liters of water
Oh, really?
for one t-shirt. And so that's a lot, and to put that in perspective, that's like 30 bathtubs of water. So
The fuck?
yeah, no, and it's
What? See, that's ridiculous.
yeah, and like this whole like clothing and fashion industry, like it is the second highest polluter after like oil and gas. Yeah, it makes up 10% of the carbon emissions. So like just that alone, you always
Really?
yeah you think it'd be cars and you think it'd be, like transportation, but like and a lot of it too is because there's a lot of transporting from the actual raw material of the cotton to
Oh, it's
when it gets spindled into a fiber and then when it gets made into an actual fabric and from there when it gets like sewn on by workers, right? And then it gets and then it finally gets shipped, right? So there's a lot of moving
I didn't
around.
even think about that. It's the manufacturing. It's the industrial manufacturing
Yeah.
of the process.
And like yeah, and let alone too like the pesticide that's used in right like it's very intensive in the pesticide and the insecticide that's used to keep these things just like free of insects and to make sure like the yield is the best, right? Um, so yeah, no, it's
That's
definitely
crazy, actually. I never even thought about that. So, like, in my perspective, sorry, I'll
Yeah,
kinda
no.
let you go there.
no, you go, man.
But what is livestock the biggest contributor to the greenhouse emissions? Because I know like the methane that's released and the carbon
Right.
dioxide that's released. Like I've heard that livestock is well at least more than the automobiles that we have.
It's definitely up there, and I've heard that same like statistic too.
Yeah.
I wouldn't doubt it. And but like in my defense too, I think there's definitely a lot of room for like, and I've seen like stuff where like the dairy industry and they're trying to reduce emissions here and there, whether that's their facilities or um, just actually how they grow the animals. So like they'll whether that's what they do their feed them, so like they belch less, right? But yeah, no, it's definitely like a high contributor. Um, but I think there's profits being made. The exact details I couldn't tell you right now. But yeah, I think there's potential for it to be lower.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any more examples?
Yeah, for sure. Like for example, yeah, no, for sure. Like for example, and like one big thing I think about like being a consumer is just how you like take care of your belongings, right? So like they last longer, and just cause like yeah, if you can have like the best stuff made, like with like most ethically or whatever, but if you treat it like shit and it's like it rips and stuff whatever after like two wears, what's even the point, right?
Yeah.
So like what I do for example is I'm trying to be more conscious of when I when I wash and stuff like that, like I like try to throw my jeans out in the wash as much, because I've also heard from like the president of Levi's that like you're not supposed to throw your jeans into the wash as much because like that ruins them, right?
Oh really? Shit, I think I
That's
wear
right, like
jeans.
like
Throw everything in the washer. I'm lazy.
I used to do that too, but but also like you're also like lazy too if you don't put them in the wash because you just hang up and boom, that's
Yeah.
one less thing to fold,
How
one
do
less
you
thing to
wash
dry.
them then?
Well, my criteria for like what I wash, like obviously the essential like socks and all stuff like that are dirty, like no question asked. But like
Yeah.
the outerwear stuff like that, where like they don't really get dirty, it's like well like then you're like okay like if there's stains and stuff on them, yeah like throw them if like
or
yeah
smell
like
or something like that.
yeah exactly if they but like not everything has to go in the wash after one use, right? So
That's fair.
yeah, and like what I do too is I try to avoid using the dryer. What I do is I put the highest spin cycle on my washer. Wash with cold water too. That way I'm not like having to warm up this water. And then I have in my place I was able to like have line dry, and that way I can just like avoid the dryer altogether because a dryer uses about 5 to 6 times more energy than the washer does. So it's very like the dryer is very like
Yeah.
energy intensive, right?
Yeah.
So you can cut that out. But again, I understand like not everyone has the space. Some people maybe live in an apartment; they don't have space to like line dry
Yeah,
clothing.
absolutely, yeah.
So and it's really up to you, like up to the individual and like see what they can manage, right?
Yeah, to the best of their abilities.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. What else? So like and again, I think it's like stuff like bringing your own bags to the grocery store and like things like this. These are very like small inconveniences, but with a little bit of planning, a little bit of foresight, they're not that big of a deal. Like if you always have your reusable bags in the trunk of your car, well, like boom, no, it's just
Yeah,
easy. Like
yeah.
you design your environment in a way so like that these things are easier. Like one thing I'm
To make it easy on yourself instead of being
yeah
like, oh shit, I gotta get
and
the bags. Oh, I gotta do
right.
this. I gotta do that. It's like you design your living
Your
accommodations.
living
So, yeah.
accommodations, yeah, to do so. Um, and like one thing I'd also say too is, um, if something makes something more like if a company or something makes something more convenient, think of like at whose cost is it? Like whose cost is more convenient, right? Like for example, you look at Amazon, it's like great, I can have stuff delivered to me, but then you look at the worker conditions, like right, these people
Yeah.
are like walking football fields like all the time
Yeah.
just to get you your stuff in 2 days, right? It's like
Yeah. High demand.
exactly, so it's like is it really worth it? And like this, little inconvenience can be planned out to not be a big deal. And also, like, being more conscious is also really good for your bottom line. It's like for your wallet. So it's always good. You're not gonna be spending more money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think like one thing that you and I had talked about
Yeah.
before that was actually a really good point that you made is that not to be generalizing, but a lot of individuals who are opposed to this climate change and making these changes tend to be conservative. Not to generalize, but to totally generalize. But I think one thing that's really positive about that, and that this mindset that a lot of these individuals who are conservative, who tend to be more business oriented, which is totally understandable. If you own a business, you don't want the government taking your money away. So I understand the whole belief behind that type of perspective economically. But I think it's these individuals who are more catered towards a business mindset. I feel like if you were to introduce them to the ability to make money with regards to reducing the greenhouse emissions in the globe, along with being more environmentally conscious as well too, that these individuals with these business perspectives will be able to put something together where they can make a lot of money off it, right? Because obviously fossil fuels makes a shit ton of money,
Right.
right? Like my sister works for Suncor as an environmental scientist, and she makes a lot of money, and she talks about how they're all the available resources that they give to their employees and the money that they invest, all these camps, all the food that they get there. They just like, live the good
Right.
life up there because these companies have so much money. And to be optimistic about it, if you're able to reallocate those funds to be more environmentally friendly, yeah, there's going to be an upfront cost of investments for the research and development to get to the point where you can make a lot of money off it. But it's an investment that has such a payout for so long. If you reinvest this, like the next 10-15 years, so important. But a lot of money's got to be reinvested into that newer technology
Yeah.
to make us go there. But I think one thing that's super important when you're doing those investments is, yeah, those 10-15 years is a bit of a barrier, and definitely creates that ability for individuals to be like, oh, that's a big barrier to get over. I don't know if we can do it.
Right.
But I think what's important is to look at that longevity where it's like, well, if you get over that barrier, we're good for
Right,
a
right.
long time until God knows what, some nuke goes off that sets off a chain of reactions of
Right.
World War III.
Who knows
right?
what,
You
yeah.
never know what could happen, but I think
Absolutely.
it's important to think about that long term.
Yep.
So now, with regards to this book, 'cause I know they did mention out with the old technology, what do you think has to happen with regards to eliminating that old technology to get to that point?
Well, I think you're spot on the head with like the whole like that there really seems to be a lack of solutions from the right side of the political spectrum, and me being a left winger, I think like that's definitely something that we need.
Oh shit.
Because as much as I think it's time to no longer make this a political issue, right? Like we could definitely benefit
It's a
from
human
other.
issue.
Exactly the human issue, and we can benefit from people who have problem solving mindset, and if we can show them that there is rewards, and it can be done differently, right? Because right now it's all regulation. That's all there is. Because no one on the right side, and this is maybe a generalization, has really stepped
We
up.
love to generalize on this podcast.
Oh.
Go for it. We
But-
love it. We love those good old stereotypes.
Yeah, man. But like,
Yeah.
it's like to this point in time, there's never been like a right winger that's given like a solid answer. They've just been delaying it. So like, and like I don't like dealing with just like the red tape either. Like I can't stand going to the registry, and it's the worst, the absolute worst. So if there's a way to streamline it and make it better, like it's absolutely essential, right? And stop making this a political issue, because again, like you said, it's a human issue. But funny enough, there have been examples of like conservatives trying to make this change, right? For example, in 2019, there was a lobbying group that was trying to get like a right, well, like a Republicans to actually care about like climate change and like see what it has in store for them, let alone like the political advantages, because our generation, like the newer generations, like they definitely care about climate change, right? So, and if you can actually form a plan that actually takes these issues head on, I'm guessing you will see like a rise in support for your party. But right now, like if you do nothing, like you have nothing for people to latch onto, right? And so also another thing I watched about one of the places that was like really good in fighting climate change was, out of all places, Texas. You think about like Texas would be the last place you think about,
Yeah, well,
but here's what they did: is that they're a very conservative place. They voted for Trump. But what they did, they framed it differently. They didn't. They never put in the words climate change. They called it future proofing, right? So and they shifted it away from the political issue that it was, into just thinking, how can we better prepare ourselves? And I think like any time you face with great problems, like if you like very entrepreneurial mindset, what are problems really? Is an opportunity to make solutions and make money, right? So like exactly, if you get over that hump, and if you come out on top, especially being like one of the first to make whatever it is that you will make, right? You'll be in good shape. So yeah, I definitely think that that will help a lot. I don't like I know it's I really wanted to take that on as the first part of your statement there, but you can repeat your question too, because I'm kind of lost a little bit, but but no, because like I definitely, because like I heard you say it. I heard you say that first part, and I was like,
what was the first part of the question? Even?
no, like the first part, like you started saying like how, like, right wingers, like definitely are like could definitely make have like that different mindset, right? And it's like that that like hump that people have to get over, and eventually in the long term it'll be worth it, right?
Yeah, but we're like way too long around on that. So the other part of the question was, what kind of technology, like obviously fossil fuels and getting replaced with renewable energy such as nuclear power and solar panels, are like clear, obvious candidates for how to out with the old technology and in with the new technology, letting go of the old world,
right?
As the book says.
Well,
what can you add on to that?
Well, I think one thing the book mentioned too is the fact that like we have to, like, I guess, thank the new world, because like this fossil fuel era has brought us a modern world, like, and there's no denying that. I think that's like a problem when people identify like as someone with like their identified personality to environmentalism, is they're like, especially here in Alberta, like you're like, oh well, you know what, fuck the oil fields, and like that's you can't say that. Like I fell into that trap too. It's like, but you can't, because like they provide a lot for us, right? Like they've modern medicine, whatever, what have you, like plastics, like just the ability for like cars to transport and all the different things, like not even like just the actual car itself, but like all the different pieces, like the clothing for polyester and stuff like that. Like it's definitely, and we have to like thank them and just but also move on to different things and just be able to accept like the fact that like that time like thank them and be able to just know that that time has ended and just move forward, whether that be nuclear, which is a really good option. I think I don't know enough about it yet, but I definitely want to learn more about it. Solar or wind, like the actual types of power, I'm not too sure about. I just don't know enough about to comment on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think like an analogy that I heard with regards to nuclear energy, and I know we were talking about this before the podcast, but I think it was a good way. It really put it in the eyes of me. I was like, okay, that does make sense. But
Yeah.
I think the analogy that I heard was that when you look at a car, for example, built in the 60s,
Yeah.
no power steering, shitty brakes, no suspension, probably didn't have a seatbelt, no power steering, probably had a built-in ashtray as well too.
Right.
And if you were trying to drive that car on the roads today, like
You struggle.
You'd be able to get to A to B, but it'd be a
Yeah.
struggle, and
Yeah.
like you'd be full of headaches, and your ass would be sore. You might kill a few people, like no biggie, but like you might kill a few people.
Yeah.
I think the same analogy can be implemented with regards to nuclear power. When you look at the reactors that melt down, that's technology that was built years ago.
Right.
Years ago. Now when you look at the technology that we have, I think you'd be dumb to not be able to identify that, okay, we have the technology to build these nuclear reactors that
Yeah.
are safe, that have those safeguards in place. If something goes wrong, they have the ability to shut these reactors down before there's a catastrophic meltdown such as in Chernobyl.
Right.
And I think it's something that we really need to start investing in. Obviously, Ontario uses nuclear energy, but I think just as a globe, we all need to start using nuclear technology.
Absolutely. I think it's like a revamp that we need to do, right?
Yeah,
Like we have
absolutely.
to give it a second chance, not the right wording, but like just like see what improvements have been made, and because I'm sure there's been big improvements. Like I've heard of technologies here and there,
Yeah.
but yeah, I know for sure. Definitely give it something too. But yeah, definitely just try new technologies out too. But we can't like also just put all our eggs in one basket into technology, right? We still have to do like our little bit here and there, because technology is a two-way street, right? It's a two-edged sword, if you will. It's a better analogy.
Yeah.
Like you look at social media in our phones, right? Like 2000, we're like, this is great. We have all the information in our pockets. Amazing.
Yeah.
But look at us now. Now we're
All
like,
this
okay, now.
misinformation that's going around right
Yeah.
now. It's crazy.
So it's like it's like it could be used either way, and like
Yeah.
technology, for example, like it could be used to make our systems more efficient, but it also could be used to help find like oil and gas that are buried even deeper,
Yeah.
right? Like I think recently there was a story about like Shell in South Africa, and they were like using, I think it was sonar, just to like to map out the ground floor and to see where there could be reserves. But in the meantime, it was disrupting like whales, because you're like blasting loud sounds
Oh, okay. Yeah.
constantly, and especially like whales that use frequencies to like navigate and to communicate. That's very not I don't want to say painful, but like it's very disruptive to them.
Disturbing to them.
Yeah. So like yeah, you definitely, or like we can't, like same analogy of putting our eggs in one basket. We can't just trust a guy like Musk to just like take us to the future and
I am
fix
trusting him, though.
fix all our problems. I mean
Lord
he's
Savior must take us to Mars, man. Let's go. Let's get off this planet.
yeah. But yeah, no, it's like it's definitely things we gotta do too. And I think back to the idea of like the individual things that we can do is like the reason why I think it's so important to them. It's not just because like they are gonna change the world, because realistically, let's look at it like the big corporations in the world. They're a big factor in like the greenhouse gas and stuff like that. But I like to think of it like I like something to tie you down, right? Because there's gonna be days in the future where there's gonna be governments that make great strides, but there's also gonna be, and companies too. But there's also gonna be days where there's gonna be shitty headlines and bad news, right? But like if you do like your own little thing, it'll keep you grounded, right?
Yeah.
And there was, I think, a point in the book too where they mentioned it. Like there was a study by MIT or somewhere like that where they studied like children after they watched like a Planet Earth movie, and then but also after watering a plant, and they like got the feedback like what do they think, like where they felt like they were mm, more impactful, right? It was obviously like after, like it wasn't after like they watched this BBC movie about the tigers or anything, because what could like a child in elementary school do about like tigers? Nothing, right? But if you look at like a plant, like yeah, like, they're constantly every day they're checking up on their plant, watering the plant, and they see that progress. Like it's very tangible what they can do, and similar to
Sense of hope.
exactly sense of hope. But like just like it grounds you, right? It's grounded on what you are doing, and like also if like yeah, it's if people like everything's going to shit, you still have your stuff. Be like yeah, well at least I'm making my contribution,
Yeah.
whether it's gonna save the world or not. First of all, I don't think that's for like us to determine right now. I think it's for the history books to determine, right? But you can like still have that and have like some sense of hope. Like you won't, like your emotion won't be tied into the news. Because like you've seen with COVID, like it's very easy to get caught up in one thing and be like, oh, it's great, and then life is bad, and
There's a fact to confirm any belief out there.
exactly just to like so you do your own little thing, and you be like, okay, well, all else I'm still doing my thing, and it helps like keep me grounded.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think one thing that kind of go back to the misinformation thing
Mm-hmm.
that was really kind of scary about this book was how their ability to predict in the quote-unquote red world, the world that where we fuck up and don't reach our goals, that when that starts to happen, what happens is there becomes this distrust in the government, and then now all throughout social media there's all this disinformation and this inability to trust almost any source. Like they lost all trust in the news networks, they lost all trust in any social media news that's been released. And like just listening to that, I was like, holy shit, because this was written before COVID, I'm assuming.
Just before, yes.
Just before. And like just hearing that, I was like, that's what's happening with COVID right now. So it's,
Yeah.
if you don't believe this book and the facts that bring this book, I think that's a prime example to be like, oh, obviously they know what they're talking about, because the second shit hits the fan, which is essentially what happens in that scenario, everything goes to shit. People don't trust each other. People don't trust the government. People don't trust anything they hear because there's so much misinformation out there. And I think COVID has been a prime example of how it's created that scenario of going on social media and having that distrust in any information you have. Because what I said before is nowadays you can find any type of scientific research to back up almost any fact out there.
I would debate that. I mean, like I wouldn't call it scientific, but there's definitely.
Cool, yeah, fair, scientific, yeah.
I would definitely say there's definitely sources out there that can confirm whatever you want.
Yeah.
The legitimacy of it varies, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. Have you seen the movie Don't Look Up on Netflix?
Yeah, I did actually. Oh, that was a good
Great movie, eh?
Yeah, good movie. Had a great cast on it, actually.
Amazing, yeah.
I honestly, to kind of go to a bit of movie review, I liked it. I liked the concept of it, but for how quirky and corny the movie was, I think it could have used more comedy involved.
I could see that, yeah.
But great movie though. Anyways, go back to your point.
No, I just like that because like they basically cover that like idea where it's like they make that thing where like they're like, okay, well like they give people a reason. Not I'm trying to say it without spoiling the movie. Well,
Spoil it. Apparently Spider-Man dies.
Spoiler, I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it either.
Okay,
That's
cool.
what Jake came on and said one time during the podcast.
All right, so
Dude, spoiled it.
it's not us that spoiled it. It's someone else.
Okay, this podcast is released in like 2-3 weeks, so we're good.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Spider-Man by now, it's like you played yourself, really.
Yeah, I think we both played ourselves.
Oh, I don't give enough shit about Spider-Man. Like I feel like it's a very unpopular opinion right now,
That's
but
fair, yeah. Nah, it's low on my priority list.
but yeah, no, for sure. Like I think, and like the reason why I mentioned that is because like they have the idea of like distrust in media, and I don't know how we move about that, but it's definitely something we have to address. Because like yeah, either we take a new approach to it or something, but like we have to be able to agree on something. And I think too, it's like when you like what I found for like a more individual level when I'm talking to people, it's like you can't just like pepper them with facts, because that's not, you gotta like you really talk to them.
Back then and they don't care.
Yeah, well, like,
Yeah.
but also like you gotta talk to them and like listen to their perspective, and like why is it that they're concerned and really like get to the root cause of that,
Hmm.
and then be like like, make sure like they're heard, and but then also be like, okay, here's what's going down, right? And but that requires a lot of time. It requires like like building up that reliability and that trust with the person, which, and I think it's also too is because, for example, I know it's like if you hear someone say something about COVID, for example, like, or QAnon, you automatically, it's very easy to assume the rest of their beliefs, right? It's
Yeah.
very easy to just assume and like
Put
make
them into that box of categories.
make a
Oh, you're one of those. Yeah.
caricature for them. Like, okay, boom, like that's them. But I mean, no, like there's probably a reason why they got to that belief. So if you can dismantle that, it'd be great. The thing is,
Yeah.
I don't think no one has the time to sit down and have like solid conversations with everyone.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
Well, I think like a line that I really like to use. I don't know where I heard it or if I came up with myself.
Yeah,
I think I probably came up with myself. I'm a genius.
give yourself credit. Yeah, all the credit.
Smoking off. But essentially, is a line, and it goes. It's simple, actually.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I was in their shoes. Sorry, I fucked that up.
Take your time with your podcast.
Yeah. That drink hit me there for a bit. I'm sure if I lived in their shoes and experienced life through their lens, I would have the same perspective.
Yeah. No, I don't.
And that's like once I kind of I said that to myself one time, and I was like, oh fuck, that's true. If I was born in their body and I grew up in the environment they grew up, because we're all products of our own environments.
Mm-hmm.
And I experienced the experience that they had, and I had the sensations that they have in their body with regards to like their mental or their chemical balances in their body with regards to their mental state.
Yeah.
I'm sure I would believe the exact same perspective. And like just once I kind of played out that thought experiment, it's really allowed me to be more open-minded to accepting other people's beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see that. Like, you definitely have to like really like like put a mile like step a mile in their shoes.
Yeah.
And but like I feel like also we can't be carried away and just like take their word as gold, right? But like just see where that understanding comes from, and like see where there's a split between like the facts and what they believe, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, definitely. I think it's definitely important. I know that too about me. I'm trying to fix that. It's just like, as soon as I hear something that disagrees with my point, not just to like, like put them in that box and assume everything else, but like actually sit there and listen, hear them out, right? And see what they have to say. And I think just like that huge, just the communication between the two sides is everything.
Well, I think it's just important just to approach those situations with curiosity.
Yeah.
To have an open mind and be like, my perspective on this situation is not going to influence what you're going to say in the next 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
I just want to understand your situation. Like when I had the flat earther come on, there's so much I was like, this dude is on the spectrum. I don't understand this dude. What the fuck is going on? But part of me is also just like, I'm so curious to understand where this person is coming from, because this is such an unorthodox perspective on the world.
Right.
Where I'm just doing it for general curiosity. As sad as it sounds, entertainment.
No, that's fine. Like, I mean, I think too, it's like another thing. It's like what I've recently like come to the conclusion is it's not my job to change people's perspectives. I can like listen to them and like lay
It's
out.
a responsibility to put on yourself if you like kind of have that perspective as well too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like just hearing them out and be like, okay, here, let's have a frank discussion with it, because maybe like some of their concerns are legitimate, and and you go and address that, and maybe just listen to sources that are less than ideal, but and you hear them out, because at the end of the day, like what me saw like a right winger and a flat earther or a QAnon person, what do we all really want, right? We all really want a better world. Yeah. Like, we differ on how we're gonna get to that better world, but we all want a world where humanity is better off, right? So But yeah, and then so I think once we can like come back down to that bottom truth and then work our way from there, we'd be better off. Yeah.
No, I actually really like that idea, where it's just like find those common things
Yeah.
and build off from there.
Yeah, and I think too is like back to climate change. I think it's really like it's gonna be really difficult too, is because in terms of politics, um, because like these changes we're making aren't gonna be easy per se, right? Like we are gonna have to adjust our lifestyles, and I think it's gonna be very difficult because at some point or another, there's gonna be a politician or some famous figure that's gonna really pull on our heartstrings and like on nostalgia and just be like, oh, remember how simple things were? Why don't we just go back to how it was?
Yeah,
You
keep something
know?
stupid.
But it's like, and it's gonna be very tempting to do that, but we can't give in. And I think there's like a really a quote from The Office that I really like.
White girl shit time now.
Yeah, man, it's what is it? It was Dwight. He's like, he said, nostalgia is the second greatest weakness of humans next to the neck, you know? And it was like, it was really, it was just something else to it, but it was like,
That's
but
a
it,
Dwight Schrute quote, man.
right?
God
It's like,
damn, yeah.
but it's like, it's really honest. It's crazy because, and when we think of like nostalgia, what are we're not thinking about like better times. We're just thinking about a time where we didn't know the problem it had, right? Like, if you think back to when you were younger, you didn't care that like the planet wasn't in a great shape.
Yeah.
You just like it because you didn't know all the fucked up shit that was
Ignorance
going
is
on.
bliss when you're
Yeah,
younger.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's what you want to go back to, right? So we have to really like be wary of future politicians and stuff like that that try to play on that emotion and try to draw us back because it'll be very tempting. It will be, but we have to remember why we're doing what we're doing. You know.
Yeah, we're the stepping stone that's crucial for the
Exactly.
next step with regards to the evolution that happens to
Well,
Homo
just
sapiens.
how just yeah, or just even how we treat this planet, and like how the livability of our
Yeah.
planet is for the next 100 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, man.
Well, and I think like a big takeaway from this is like one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on there on the podcast was to create that sense of hope for a lot
Yeah.
of people, to give them that different perspective of being like, okay, like this is something that's been obviously in the news for a long time and it's not going away anytime soon. If anything, it's going to become more prevalent, especially following COVID. I feel like news stations are going to be all over the next big quote unquote scare.
Yeah.
And I feel like when these news stations try and scare individuals, I think what's important is to come back to that sense of hope and be like, no, it's in our control, right? Put your trust in the individuals up top. Like obviously, a lot of them are greedy and narcissist and the need for power,
Yeah.
but it's important to understand that with regards to their intentions. If they truly want power, quote unquote, and like the negative stereotypes that come with politics,
Yeah.
they will do change because they understand that, okay, if we still want to keep this power and keep this influence on society, we are gonna have to have some change so we can keep on.
If we can
with
keep
power.
on like the status quo
Right.
to like yeah. No, and
Right.
I get that, yeah, and definitely, and I think like the whole idea of stepping stones for sure is really
Mm-hmm.
interesting because, and there's a quote by Bill Gates that's really cool. He says people generally tend to over assume what they can get done in a year,
Mm-hmm.
but under assume what they can do in 10 years. So like that's I think to me that's really powerful.
That is.
That like we cause like and you look at like start of January, it happens every year without fail. New resolutions, right?
Yeah, go to the gym, man. We get
Gonna
in shape.
but like it's like if you see like a 10-year scope, then you're like okay, like
It's easy.
then it's not much pressure on a certain time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
Consistency. It's those small incremental improvements on a not even a day-to-day basis. Well, granted, it does happen on a day-to-day basis, but
Yeah.
on a month-to-month basis.
yeah,
You see that small little change. You think
absolutely.
about like the multiplier and the compounding effect that can apply to those small changes over years
Exactly.
and years and years is like huge.
And I think we're trending in the right direction, although I don't think that'll ever be reported as much. But yeah, no, we're on the up and up. Might not look like that, but if we keep doing what we're doing, and like fix certain bad habits that we have, we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, I like
So,
that perspective.
yeah,
I think
no.
it's the right perspective to have as well too. And even
Yeah.
just sitting down here and talking about this is definitely like gave me more motivation. I hope it gives like
Yeah.
the 2 people that listen to this podcast motivation as well. Too.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
it's 2 people.
If it's 2 people, it's
baby.
2 more people.
It's
Like
2
you know.
more people, man.
No, I mean like I think like I brought the sweater today because it's like really
Big
important.
change.
Big change starts with small. Start small.
Yeah,
So like you
it's
know
good.
that's everything, right? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
so yeah, because you start small and eventually compound into something great. So yeah, man. Overall, it looks a little bleak, but we got a little bit of time on our hands to get it right, and yeah, think we can turn this around, or at least like you know slow the bleeding, you know.
Yeah,
So it's not
absolutely.
as bad as it could possibly be.
Yeah, create a world for our grandkids.
I wouldn't even go that far. I'd say
Oh,
just
shit.
for us.
So we can
Like-
colonize Mars with Elon Musk, yo.
Good luck with you. I'm staying put right here, my
I'm
friend.
going
Like
the fuck off, man. I'm going to Mars.
you won't die.
Actually, I'm going to Saturn, man.
You're going wow, you're just gonna do your own little trip, hey?
I'm going to Uranus.
Jesus. Well, I was like not surprised by that, honestly.
I'm surprised I didn't say that one first before Saturn.
Yeah, I like as soon as you started mentioning planets, like here we go. It's yeah.
Well, I'm going to do a Jeremy Clarkson, and on that bombshell, I think it's time to end this. Cheers,
Yeah.
Perez.
Cheers, buddy.
Get your drink, man.
Well,
Cheers,
close,
dude.
but yeah.
Alright, boy, man. I had
All
a lot
right.
of fun. Thanks for coming on.
Oh,
This
thanks
is
for having me. I
awesome. I'm
appreciate
looking
it.
forward to editing this
Yeah,
bitch.
man.
Alright, cheers, everybody. Banger.
It's off the dome. Good, check it out.
Escape reality with Matt Z.
Well, Dak, here's the deal. I'm the best there is, plain and simple. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I piss excellent.